Today we're going to take a look at the Cinemod version of the Helios 44-2. As always in my videos, the focus here is not so much on photo quality, but rather on the cinematic use of this lens. The Helios 44-2 with a focal length of 58mm and an aperture of f2 is one of the most popular vintage lenses, as it's fairly inexpensive and has a very distinctive look. Especially on full-frame sensors, this lens produces an extreme swirly bokeh. This lends itself particularly well for an anamorphic mod. These anamorphic lenses often have an inlay with a fishing line installed in front of the last lens. The oval shape of the inlay makes the bokeh appear oval, similar to that produced by a genuine anamorphic lens. Additionally, the fishing line enhances the lens flares, creating stronger horizontal flares. In addition, the aperture of the lens is declicked. The focus ring is equipped with a gear ring, and on the front there's a step-up adapter to 72mm for filters. There are various versions of the Helios 44 as it was produced from the 50s to the 90s. You can identify the version you have by the logo on the front. This one here is the Valdai version, which is considered to be the worst Helios. But let's now take a look at some examples of this Valdai lens. The Helios 44-2 is generally very sharp despite the seemingly poor build quality. The swirly bokeh comes into its own against very busy backgrounds, even on the cropped Super 35 sensor. This gives the lens a very characteristic look even without a Cinemod, but let's now look at the downsides which pertain to the Cinemod. Firstly, if you're using an inlay, you lose some of your aperture. Given that the Helios starts with an aperture of f2, which is fairly bright, this is not a significant disadvantage. The more visible the oval bokeh is, the more the fishing line inside the lens is noticeable. This example illustrates it quite well. There's no workaround for this issue, but it's dependent on the strength of the light sources. The lines in the bokeh are especially noticeable in evening shots. Now let's talk about the flares. Used subtly, the flares have a very cool effect. My version has an orange fishing line that works particularly well with sunsets or warm light sources. But with cool light sources, the lens flares don't look as good. Here, for example, the blue of this cold LED flashlight clashes with the orange. In this case, you should use a blue inlay. But in general, you can see the main problem here. The flares are very extreme and continuously present when light shines directly into the lens. Finally, a few words about the technical details. The Helios, as is typical for this era, comes with an M42 mount, which can be adapted to nearly any modern camera mount. However, keep in mind that with the Cinemod, the inlay must be 100% horizontal to your sensor. It's easiest to use a rotatable adapter in this case. One peculiarity, particularly with older Helios models, is that the focus and aperture are swapped. The focus ring is accordingly very close to the camera mount. Bear this in mind when rigging your camera and intending to use a focus motor. The modded lens is still quite light at just 300 grams and can easily be used on a gimbal. In conclusion, here's my summary. The Helios produces really beautiful images whether with or without the Cinemod. An anamorphic mod can work very well when used subtly. It's not recommended for night shots with many light sources due to the extreme flares. Since this lens is relatively inexpensive, it's advisable to have one version for flares and one without. And that wraps up our dive into the Cinemod Helios 44-2 lens. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.